with Renee. Celebrating the birthday of Kwame Ture. What's up, world? What's up? Welcome to Saturdays with Renee, episode, is this 38?
Is it? You know,
38.
I never know until, I never know until you post it. And then I see the number.
I think, right. I think it's 38. Yeah. And as I said, entering with the bars, the rhyme, we're paying tribute today to Kwame Ture's birthday,
Yes,
June 29th.
Yes, we are.
And I couldn't think of a better way to spend, well, for us, a morning, because we are pre-recording. This isn't live.
Yes.
But so, right, June 29th, 1941, Kwame Ture was born in Trinidad and Tobago, and then became one of the most prolific and powerful and targeted Pan-African revolutionaries. We're going to spend the show paying tribute to him, and then we'll be joined shortly by our comrade, Dr. Mjiba Frehiwot will be joining us, who is, among many other things, a leader of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was co-founded by Kwame and Nkrumah Sekou Ture, and Kwame Ture helped form that as well. So this is going to be a great morning. But how are you doing, Renee? How's everything?
Look, I'm as good as can be expected, as we always say. Things are what they are, and we are doing what we do. And I, as being, a person who likes to do the research and the reading and the things, I watched so many speeches yesterday. So many speeches. It was difficult to find the ones to use because it's just bar after bar after bar after bar, and it's all still it's all still applicable. Like it all, I can't think of anything that I listened to that could not be said today, and I have not quite decided how good or bad that is.
I mean, that's the thing. On some level, that's the thing. We would hope that we would be able to say, it was great to have learned from and witnessed the analysis of a great Kwame Ture, but we can move past it and move on because we have achieved a new world, so on and so forth. But no. In fact, no. So it's true. When I went back and looked and went back and was even just digging through Ready for the Revolution, the autobiography he attempted to complete with Michael Thelwell, there is nothing that is out of place analytically, unfortunately.
No, and even I came across and listening him talking about Palestine and thinking to myself, how are we still, how is it literally still applicable? Like, how did that happen? how decades and it's still exactly the same conversation, which is wild to me. But I don't. I mean, I guess it's a. See, I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because when you have voices that are so clear and so the vision, right? Like to have the vision of like what needs to happen and the ability to speak that into existence and to share it with people so that they are also learning, right? That's never something you don't want access to. right? But at the same time, when all is said and done, we're still facing a world that is ruled by capitalism and individualism, and we are not organized. And all of those things, have essentially kept us in a loop. It's like, I don't want to say inescapable, because obviously the point is to try and escape it, but it hasn't happened yet, obviously.
So I know you got, of course, a number of clips on the run sheet, and Mjiba is going to join us in roughly 20 minutes.
Well, do you want to start with your review that you sent to me first?
Of the
and then yeah, because I think it's important also to engage in that conversation about how it happens that when you have voices that are relevant for for the wrong things, right? Because that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I'll make sure the link is in the show description if anybody wants to read the entire thing themselves. But the review, and I even did a video at one point about it. But the review from 2015 of Stokely, A Life by Peniel Joseph. So there's a lot of, I mean, on the one hand, so I was sort of, I felt a call to write it. I'll say really what I felt a call to write it was after I saw a video where our dear brother Josephus Skip Coon, in one of his songs, one of his brilliant songs where he references Kwame Ture, holds up a book, a copy of this book from Peniel in the review, in the video, like, so you see him holding up this cover, and I remember I reached out and I was basically asking Skip, but have you actually read the book carefully? Are you paying attention to what is done in the book to Ture? And in that relatively short conversation, it became, to me at least, my memory and my interpretation was that this was reflective of a bigger problem, that as so often happens with, and is happening more and more in worse ways today with radical and revolutionary figures, they are picked up and represented and told to us by people who don't really appreciate the politics of the person and are attaching themselves for a variety of different reasons that we would have to speculate about. But in terms of the work they produce, whether it's Spike Lee's film about Malcolm X, or obviously a lot of the more recent films and things we've been talking about a lot around here, including well, whether it's The Big Cigar or The Judas Factor or whatever, the point has been that people who are producing these products, and in this case, in academic work, are producing it about people whose politics, again, they're not in agreement with, that they're not supportive of. So when you read this book, it becomes, again, what I think what Kwame Ture was trying to warn us about, that Black visibility is not Black power, that capitalism makes us think we are thinking when we're merely reacting to stimuli. And what is done in this review, and because Peniel Joseph is no dummy, and because he's a skilled writer, he's able to concoct a version of Ture that is palatable for a mainstream, affluent, mostly white academic audience. So, and the short of it is, what he does in this biography is, one, he ignores this entire autobiography from Ture, which I think is scandalous. And then what he also does is carefully depict Ture as having some relevance when he was doing civil rights integrationist, more mainstream political organizational work. Not that that was not radical or dangerous. I don't want to disrespect that work at all. But when his goals were more in line with Dr. King's more popularized version, or in line with the sanitized version of Fannie Lou Hamer and the civil rights struggle and the struggle for the right to vote and integrate businesses, etc. He's depicted as being relevant. But as Ture's politics evolve, become more militant, more radical, I would argue more accurate, Peniel attempts to depict Joseph as, Joseph attempts to depict Ture as he says, literally losing relevance as he left sort of the mainstream Black political struggle and became more engaged in internationalism, pan-Africanism, socialism, etc. And all in such a way with the goal, I think is pretty clear, to encourage readers, particularly the target audience of white affluent readers, but then perhaps also unwitting Black audiences who might pick up Ture's work and become militant themselves. They're all targeted with a version that is saying, basically, once you move left of the Democratic Party, you've lost relevance and have wasted your potential. And then I'll stop here by saying that I have to say that the worst thing for me about the book is that it gets praise from both Gerald Horne and Robin Kelly, both of whom I've attempted on a number of occasions to engage in a discussion about their praise for Joseph's work, given that I think it's so clearly flawed and poorly done, and an attempt to negate the radical analysis. But I've been unsuccessful in sparking that conversation with them. But because the book gets that praise, Joseph is welcomed into all manner of spaces and is often, and as he said to me once, he's attempting to become the next Henry Louis Gates. And that's what praise from powerful scholars like Horne and Kelly, never mind the institutions, the elite institutions, academic, press, media, publishing, and otherwise, that have propelled Joseph to this point where he is a perpetual problem in his presence in these spaces and in producing more work around Malcolm X, et cetera, on Netflix and for Disney and wherever else. And it was my just small attempt to try to remind folks or to point people to this as a problem as we want to reconsider and tribute fallen revolutionaries, heroes, sheroes, etc. So I hope that made sense, but that's what I was attempting to do in the review, and again, folks are welcome to read it and offer up their thoughts.
Yeah, and I read it, and I didn't get through the whole video because it started to get late, and I was like, oh, we're recording that early. You better go shut it down so you can make sense in the morning. But I find this process fascinating, how everyone, this rewriting of historical figures in a way that's palatable, and in a way that really just undoes the real work that they gave to the world. It's mind-boggling, but I guess that's the point, right? And you're right. In many of the speeches, he spoke about this this effort to kind of line up what Black people should be doing in an effort to, quote unquote, move forward by aligning themselves with people who are really not concerned with Black liberation, right? So many speeches just flat out facts about the Democrats, right? Which is still, again, applicable today. And just this consistent, it's so unbelievably consistent how this still plays out, how this still plays out in this way. It's, I don't know how to. I don't know. And we talk about this a lot, right? The propaganda and the documentaries and all the things. Like how do we do this? How do we do this? Like how do you get people to understand that the new Bob Marley movie has nothing to do with the actual radical politics of Bob Marley?
Mm-hmm.
How do you remind people that once Dr. King started talking about like ditching the draft and stopping the war in Vietnam and the problems of poverty and how capitalism plays into that, like he was already not liked, but that made it worse, right? He was not heralded when he was speaking facts about like how these things were. Like it just like how do you do it?
That part I don't know. One of the things that I've wanted to do is and this is one of the reasons, and again, why I keep coming back to this issue that I continue to have with Peniel, whose work continues to reverberate, is that, for instance, one of the points that I was making is that how could you claim that Ture had lost relevance when, as you just pointed out, if you go on YouTube, and we're going to demonstrate that here shortly, when you go on YouTube and see his speeches, first of all, they're all over the place. I used to get lecture tapes with his speeches on them. As I pointed out in the second edition of the Buying Power book, The Guardian in 2022 was still writing about him, was still saying that he's a problem, that the West was acknowledging, having recognized many years ago, but then wanting to, but had engaged in the process of attempting to negate his work in spreading the gospel, if I may, of internationalist, anti-imperialist, pan-Africanist, and socialist politics. So if people engage him directly through the autobiography, through Stokely Speaks, through the co-authored book with Hamilton, Black Power, through the endless amounts of speeches and debates online, it's, again, much like Malcolm X, there is an undeniability of the power and strength of the analysis and its ability to impact and move audiences, which is why the Josephs of the world are positioned to be the negation of that, because it is understood. The Guardian acknowledged, the British state acknowledged, the West acknowledged, the COINTELPRO papers acknowledged Ture was a problem for them. That he represented a real challenge to the power structure and to their attempt to impose upon us the preferred form of leadership that they would have us follow. So I've just, again, encouraged people as we think about Ture on his birthday, that they return to his work, take some time to revisit and share his work as the primary source material, per se, and let people sort of judge for themselves.
And as you're talking, it's occurring to me that I think all the clips I shared with you are in this time frame after he kind of shifted away from the integration and the vote. Because for me, those were the things that were most impactful as I was watching, right? Like the things that were most translatable. And again, not that, you know, as you said, you don't want to downplay that struggle for civil rights, et cetera, and voting and yada yada. But I don't mean to be dismissive, but but in listening, I mean, I for real listened to probably 5 or 6 different speeches to try and figure out like which clips are the best one. But then I'd start and I'd say, okay, I'm going to listen to this much of this one. And I was so riveted that I ended up listening to the whole hour and something long speech. Like I didn't want to stop it. Like I just wanted to really take it all in. But and I think it's the one at Berkeley, and it's not a clip that I shared because, you know, we would have ended up 2 hours of just playing clip after clip with no conversation if I didn't get myself in check. But he talks about freedom, right? And this idea of freedom. And we recently went to see, my husband's on a mission. He wants us to see all of the August Wilson plays. So, you know, he did the 10 plays within the 19th century. And so we went to see Gem of the Ocean, which I'd never seen, never read, I knew nothing about it. And it was also in part about freedom. And so listening to Ture talk about this idea that these laws and civil rights and voting and where you can live and all these things, they don't give us freedom, right? Because you're born free, is what he says, right? Those laws are to remind other people that we're born free, and therefore we should be allowed to live where we want. We should be allowed to vote without fear and torture. We should be allowed to participate in systems without oppression, right? And I found it to be so, I was like, man, like, this is, how do you even attempt to cause people to lose this? Like, why do you want people to lose this? Why do you want people to not be reminded of this very, very crucial reality that our freedom is not given by Congress? I mean, oof, it was
Well, and
something.
especially after the debates the other night, so-called, and the recent Supreme Court rulings. I mean, if any, what I was going to say is, I mean, it's just another permanent sort of persistent reminder that Ture's analysis is still vibrant and on point. And really, well, we can ask our next guest who has arrived. We can ask for her thoughts on this, but that the extent to which things have gotten any better, if not worse, since Ture's passing, particularly in terms of how Black people are encouraged, or anyone is encouraged, to engage the accepted structures of U.S. government and et cetera and so forth. But Renee, with your permission, our guest is here. If it's all right.
Permission? If you don't stop your crazy talk.
Just playing, you know. So listen, everybody, we have one of my favorite people in the world is joining us to talk about one of my favorite people in world history. No stranger to this platform. Among many other things, Dr. Mjiba Frehiwot is a research fellow at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana in the History and Politics section. Her research interests include Pan-African political thought, African diaspora cultural and political identity, decolonization of knowledge production, and race and identity in the African diaspora. She is also my comrade in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and we welcome her back to the platform. Professor Frehiwot, welcome. Good to see you again. Greetings.
Greetings, comrade. And my internet may be a bit shaky, so I apologize if that's the case. But I thought you were going to say I was an organizer with the APRP, my brother. That was too long of a intro.
I
You see
always,
my
I will,
title. You see my
I
title,
will.
organizer.
All right, in the future, you're not allowed to bring any more guests who don't check you the minute they're. They get on.
These are the only guests I would ever want. My apologies.
Greetings.
My apologies.
I'm so happy to be here. Oh, no problem. No problem. I know you got to do the formal thing, but comrade, me, I'm an organizer. First and foremost.
First and foremost, no doubt, no doubt. As was the mandate of our dear brother. So, Renee, I don't know if you have if you want to get started with any of your introductory questions for Mjiba, or I thought we could maybe start with having you recite for us a little bit of the history, maybe of the AAPRP and its relationship to Ture or his evolution, something to that effect.
We should start there. Yes.
Okay, cool.
and then we can go into some of these clips. Yeah.
And then we got these clips to play. We can riff off of that too. So yeah.
Nice. So the All African People's Revolutionary Party was called for in 1968 by Kwame Nkrumah, actually, in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And it's important to note that 1968 is after the coup d'etat in Ghana, right? So like there were some shifts in understanding around Pan-Africanism and the road to Pan-Africanism. And so when Nkrumah was sitting in Guinea with Sekou Touré, and Amilcar Cabral was there, by the way, as well as Kwame Ture, he rewrote the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And one of the organizations in the book is the All African People's Revolutionary Party. There are other organizations like the All African Committee for Political Coordination, the All African People's Revolutionary Army, and the handbook is really a guide for understanding sort of how to this sort of zonal, it's a zonal analysis, basically to determine if a territory, and that territory could be anything, is liberated, right, can be really truly organized, is contested, as in like there's some spaces that are liberated, some spaces are under enemy control, and then an enemy held zone. And so Kwame Ture was in Guinea in 68 and was asked by Nkrumah. First of all, there's contending history about where the first work study circle was. Some say it was in Washington, D.C. when Kwame Ture came back to D.C. to form the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Others say the first work study circle was in Guinea in 1968. And Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Amilcar Cabral, and Kwame Ture were part of the first work study circle. I'm really not going to debate. I like the DC
version, honestly.
Yeah,
let's go with the DC version.
I can appreciate that. It's like, I'm not really going to debate because I wasn't in DC in 68 and I wasn't in Guinea in 68. So I don't know necessarily where the first work study circle was.
But you were eventually in DC. You were eventually at Howard University. That's where you and I eventually met, in that area.
Yes.
So I like that version. That's all I'm saying. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
I hear you. No problem. I hear you.
He always gonna want the version where he involved. That's all that's about.
I understand.
Well, I'm closest to it.
Yeah. No. Right. I hear you. So Kwame Ture comes back and he starts to found the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And to make a long story short, because I could talk all day about the founding and the APRP, to make a long story short, the party basically grew, from a small cohort to, be an international organization over, multiple continents. Right? We have folks on the African continent, in Europe, we've got, folks in the Caribbean, and we also have folks in the United States, chapters, organizers. And interestingly, Malcolm X Park, some people call it Meridian Hill Park or something, whatever. That's not Meridian Hill Park. It'll always be Malcolm X Park. Someone was like, I'm going to Meridian Hill Park. I was
Somebody
like,
asked me
"You mean
yesterday,
Malcolm X,
yeah, somebody asked me, can you scoop me? I'm gonna be at Reagan International. I was like, I don't know where that is. If you're gonna be at National Airport or DC National, I might get you, but I don't know where Reagan Airport. I don't know where that joint is. You're gonna be lost forever.
Exactly. It's like, okay. So the party used to be part of the African Liberation Day Committee, which organized these massive African Liberation Days in DC. And like, if you just Google African Liberation Day on YouTube or on Google, there's pictures, there's quotes, there's, video clips of Kwame Ture speaking, of multiple African people globally speaking at this sort of international African Liberation Day. And then like in the late 70s, early 80s, the APRP decentralized ALD and then started having African Liberation Day in many different spaces. And so I joined the party in 1997, which I'm aging myself, but that's all right, and I was a master's student at California State University, Sacramento. And and I want to tie this into to KT, because the first time I heard KT speak was in San Jose, and when I was an undergrad, right, at San Jose State. And this was, he made his transition in 98. So this was, I joined shortly, before he made his transition. But I was like, there's something to this pan-Africanism thing, right? And as I started really thinking more critically about the APRP and how it had influenced me, and it's influenced through its race, class, and gender analysis, it's influenced through the importance of work and study and our work-study process, its importance of, promoting socialism over capitalism, right, and egalitarianism and humanism. These things began to really entice me. But what really enticed me was what shifted my analysis was, in 1996, I was able to do a study abroad with this auntie called Sister Nehanda at the time, and she was in the APRP, and she was at San Jose State, and she was organizing on campus, and she brought a group of students to Ghana. And I came to Ghana, and guess what I met? A chapter of the APRP in Ghana. I was like, this is interesting, right? So then I went back to Ghana. I went back to the US, finished, and then got my master's, and I was at Sac State. And I was walking on campus like the first week of campus, whatever, in August. You're like super excited. Oh my God, I can't wait. This kind of thing, till you realize that, the European students in the class want to get you kicked out because you're talking the real stuff. But that's a different ballgame. And so I'm walking on campus and I see this brother Jamu, who I had never seen before. And he's like, oh, sister, let me give you this pamphlet for this organization I'm in, the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I was like, really? Sister Nehanda? Brother Akabundu? He was like, yeah, I know them. And so I was like, okay. And then boom, went through work study, and I've been in work study ever since. But what, for me, the party, the Pan-African nature of the party, because the party is a Pan-African primacy of African, peace. Like Africa is primary, straightforward. We're not disrespecting nobody in the diaspora, but like Africa's land, right? And if you don't control your land, then what do you control? And so the party's very clear about that. The party, and let me just do a couple of key points. The party has been, actively engaged in the anti-apartheid movement in SA. We had actual election observers for the 1994 elections, like the first elections. The party has had delegations go to, Guinea under Sekou Touré, go to Libya under Muammar Gaddafi, right? And so the party really has been, and the party has been a staunch supporter of Palestine. Since we're talking about, Palestine right now, been a staunch supporter of Palestine since, time immemorial. And so the party isn't just a party that is saying, African people must unify and whatever. We're saying African people must unify. We must liberate ourselves. We must transition the economic system to scientific socialism. But also we have to embrace internationalism and internationalist struggles globally, because we know that this global capitalist system is not going to just, be defeated only by the efforts of Africans, right? And even if we defeat it in Africa, what will happen is what, a lot of things that are going on in spaces like Bolivia or Cuba or Venezuela, where there's attacks from capitalists on the outside. So this is the APRP sort of in a nutshell, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it. But I've been in the party for many years, and I think it's made me who I am. Basically, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be sitting in a crowd right now if it wasn't for the APRP. I wouldn't have a PhD in African studies if it wasn't for the APRP. I wouldn't, really understand my contributions to society if it weren't for the APRP. So this is who I am. And that's the APRP.
Right on. All right, right on. Appreciate that. Ray,
Brilliance.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just brilliance. Everything, the whole thing. So I don't know if when Jared invited you, if he told you how this all transpired, because every now and again we go into the week with like no plan at all, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's do this. So I got the text, and what he shared with me was the interview that you all did on the radio show. And I don't know if
years ago, something. It's been a while. Yeah.
I don't even know.
I'm like looking back to see when that was.
Right. And so when he followed up and said she's going to join, I was like, that was my note. That was literally my note, to play a clip of something you said in response to a question that Jared asked you. So since you did this brilliant background on how you got here and what the party's about, I think we should start with that, just so people can have that baseline understanding of why this type of formation is so critical in what we need to do today.
Perfect.
We're being exploited and oppressed everywhere that we go. Everywhere that you turn, you see African people oppressed. And so we at some point have to transform this system. There has to be total revolution, a total change, and it takes organizations to lead us through this process. And I think sometimes the challenge becomes, oh, well, we're getting together, 20 people in a room, and what impact are we really making? Well, I'll tell people, first of all, the first thing that we must do is we must change the ideology of our people, right? Because we have very capitalistic, individualistic ideology, which goes along with the capitalist system. And so if that is the ideology that we have, and we then power changes hands at home, and the resources get in the hands of the people, we'll still be exploited and still oppressed. So we have to transform that ideology. That's the first step that we must go to in order to achieve liberation of pan-Africanism. And just quickly, as I close out this long-winded sort of answer, which I said was going to be short, but I apologize for that. Like, if we look at the history of the continent, every single country on the continent has had coup d'etats in the last 10 years, for the most part, maybe not every country. But it's just regime changes. They're still, beholden.
Oh, wait, I let it run longer. My fault.
Listen, it's all relevant.
Yeah, my fault. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'll make sure the link is in the show description. The interview is dope, so folks can go back and get the whole thing. But is that? Are you getting what is that? Is that an announcement?
That's somebody on my yard selling something. So I'm not sure what they're selling.
I was like, okay, my bad. I was like, what is that? What is happening? Okay.
That's somebody on my yard. I think they might be selling like some mosquito spray or something.
Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up.
That's I love it.
Ghana in real time, folks. Africa for Africans in real time. Right here it is.
Real time.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
But the reason I picked that is because one of the conversations we are having consistently on this show is the importance of organization and how you organize and how you position yourself within spaces and formations in order to serve the most purpose for people, right? And this was something that, throughout, as you know, Ray's speeches was this, humanity, and how important it is that anything that you pursue be with the goal of helping humanity, and that you get away from individualism and capitalism and all of these things. And so, I listened to the interview and thought to myself, I had to check. I was like, wait, what year what year was this, right? I mean, if you think about, like, even now, saying even now, like, coup d'etats in Africa, and how literally it is relevant right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this cycle of, you know, these, like, this reoccurring lesson in life about humanity and being careful of your leadership and all of these things. And I firmly believe, and it's part of the reason that I agreed to do this with Jared, is because my goal is to get people to open their eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention, understand what's happening, realize that all the things that you were presented with are all in an effort to distract you and to desensitize you to the realities. Like, it's all wrapped into the same problem. And so I thought what you said was so important about, like, really understanding, like, we have to find a way to work together because oppression is everywhere and it's never going to end unless we find a way to liberate ourselves, right? And so I don't know, is there anything, like, now in listening to that then, right? Is there anything that, like, that, and then, you know, we only played like a short clip. The whole thing is probably, I think, closer to 20 minutes long, but is there anything else that, like, right now in hindsight, you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, we could have added this point when you talk about organizing within these formations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent question. And you know, as you know, as we're thinking through this question of organization, you know, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of organization, right? And, like, when I'm thinking about shifts and transformations, what, you know, we sort of see a couple of things when we're talking about movements, right? We see, and you know, everyone's familiar, but, like, for those of us who are clear, like, movements aren't necessarily ideologically driven. You know, movements are, you know, groups of people that come together for one particular cause, and then there may or may not be a leadership body, but oftentimes movements, they want one specific thing to be changed, right? And so how do we shift those movements to organizations so that we're talking about shifting the entire system? So, like, right now, as we speak, like, the youth in Kenya are on the streets, right? They're on the streets. They're saying that President Ruto basically is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. You know, in my view, he's very close to capitalists. I mean, and the reality is he sent troops to Haiti, right? Which is another African country. How can you send troops, sort of so-called peacekeeping troops, to Haiti? It doesn't make any sense that you're going to come and now so-called, you know, do peace, but really it's part of this sort of UN US occupation of Haiti, right? And so the youth on the street are saying this taxation bill is we do not want it. It's going to disenfranchise us, right? And so now they forced him to not sign this bill. Now they're saying, well, you know, you must get out, right? So we want Ruto out. But so here's the contradiction. I think movements are where we start, right? But then we have to shift to organization, because what exactly do we want after we want Ruto out? How do we shift the economic system, right? How do we shift the minds, the hearts and the minds of the masses of people, right? How do we ensure that there's not massive corruption, because there's massive corruption globally? How do we ensure that African people are not, you know, the most oppressed by race, class, and gender, right? How do we do this using movements? It's very difficult, because if you're not ideologically clear or even ideologically aligned, then you all of a sudden, after this, like, major win, people are now fighting for, you know, supremacy or leadership, and we know that the Libya, the overthrow of Gaddafi and the senseless murder of him on the side of the road was a U.S. back intervention, right? Because we know the people who were part of the so-called revolution or rebellion that came from Benghazi were trained in the U.S. This is not new. I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know. But now you saw a coalition that came together, And now what Libya is in straight shambles, right? Like straight shambles. And everyone is jockeying and fighting for power. And unfortunately, while this is a horrific example of this concept, these movements, I think it's very similar to these revolutionary movements. And so I think for me, what I think is that we certainly should have revolutionary movements, these large movements, like, you know, these anti-corruption movements, like Black Lives Matter. I mean, Black Lives Matter being revolutionary is a different ballgame, but anyhow, like they're elements, right? Like, you know, these anti-war movements, like the anti-apartheid movement. But how do we shift from movements to actually organizing a new society? For me, is really where we need to shift to as revolutionaries, right? As Pan-Africanists. And so, because if you've got, for example, and I'm not disrespecting nobody or down on nobody, but like, say if in a movement you have people who are, you know, like pro-capitalist, but they really want the capitalist, you know, accumulation for themselves, right? Like I heard a clip of Jared about his book around, you know, Black wealth, and somebody asked him, I don't know where you were, but I think you sounded like you were like in UK or somewhere, but someone was like, oh, is there something wrong with buying for Black businesses? And Jared was like, there's nothing wrong with buying for Black businesses, but we don't have the wealth. So you can have 1 million Black businesses and not really be attaining any so-called wealth, because in a capitalist system, you're really not supposed to obtain wealth. Like the reality is, look, a capitalist system is that only is built for a few people to make a major amount of profit. It wouldn't be a capitalist system if everyone had access to wealth. But what tends to happen is you have in some of these movements capitalists that really are upset that they don't have a piece of the pie, and they think that the problem is, you know, they can't own a house in the U.S. or there's or the wealth gap between Black people and white people in the U.S. And I'm saying Black and white not because I am classifying anyone as Black, but because that's the narrative. It's never really African, right? People are never really identifying with Africa because they're just concerned with this question of capitalism. You got straight Pan-Africanists who are talking about liberation and unification. You have Black nationalists. I mean, you have a whole host of people that can be in movements to address one issue. After the issue is over, the movement is gone. How do we shift from using these movements to really create, you know, global Pan-African organizations which can help change the tide, shift economic systems, shift the ideology of the people? Because really, socialism and this revolution will not happen until the masses of people are educated, right? And are politically educated, not educated, politically educated, in order to demand for a different economic system and a different kind of system where they have a positive relationship to the mode of production, the means of production, right? And so for me, I think what I would have liked to say is that, or what I would have added is that as we're shifting this, as we're pushing revolution and Pan-Africanism, we also need to be asking ourselves, what are the steps and what vehicles or institutions do we need to shift, you know, to actually have organizations which can because we really need to out-organize the capitalists, right? Right now, we're kind of just like running behind a train and trying to jump on a train and making sure they don't close the train door in our face, right? But no, we need to out-organize the capitalists so that we're driving the train. Right now, we're like, please let us on, please let us on, please. And they throw some, you know, small bread, or they throw a ladder and a couple of us get on and then we become happy. So we need to organize the whole process and not be dependent. And I'll just tell a story which I had it like 30 seconds ago. What's the story? It has to do with something. It has to do with the masses, right? So when you talk about Pan-Africanism, right? Everyday African people can participate in Pan-African activity. Maybe not everybody, but when you think about like in Ghana, in the US, in many different places, you have collective, you know, families come together and they have, you know, collective burials, they have collective weddings, they have collective birthdays. You know, somebody's down on their luck, they collectively come together to bring the person to the next level. You know, you've got trading, like on the Ghana-Togo border, for example, right? There's trading between people in Ghana and Togo, and there's interactions right on that border. I mean, you can travel from Accra to let's say Lome. Right? Let me not say Lome. You can travel from Accra to Lagos and you can speak Ewe the entire way. right? And you can you can buy goods on the border in CDs, which is a Ghana currency, in CFA, which is a currency generally in Togo and in Benin, and they're aligned to the CFA zone. They still have their money in the France Central Bank, which is a whole different ballgame. We'll get to that later. And you can buy money in Naira, which is a currency and you can buy stuff in Naira, which is a currency in Nigeria, right? And so for me, I think the question is, how do we incorporate the masses of people who are already participating in Pan-African activities? They may not be aware that it's so-called Pan-African activity, but it's still Pan-African activity, into organizations, so that organizations can lead the movements, and the movements won't be led by people who maybe have individual some individual reasons or motivations for leading these movements, but more importantly, so that these movements and the pushback is led from a Pan-African ideological perspective, and not just like everybody come in, and if you want to be a capitalist, that's cool and all that stuff. And when you look at liberation across the continent, right, the independence era, this is exactly what happened. You have people who were socialists, you have people who were Pan-Africanists, you have people who were like, look, I'm part of the elite, and I'm not really getting a piece of the pie, and I want to control the nation when the colonialists leave, right? And so they were making backroom deals. And so we have to really transform our ideology in order to stand strong on our ideological stance for the unification and liberation of Africa. So that was another long-winded conversation. I didn't say I was going to be short this time.
Be as long as you need to be, please, because it all flows back. And Jared has this way of like sitting quietly. Don't let me talk too much, because you know how I get when I get excited about our guests. So one of the things that I picked up on was leadership. And one of the reasons I enjoy doing this show so much is because we have a way of like free flowing into all the things that I really want to talk about. And so leadership, misleadership, Black misleadership, Black faces in high places, like this is a major, major issue. And I bring this up specifically because recently young Jamal Bowman lost his primary race, and people are up in arms because, APAC raised all this money and they got him out. But Margaret Kimberly did a fantastic job in the Black Agenda Report of breaking down how his failure to do the things that he needed to do, and when he achieved this position that, we can say he fought for, quote unquote, to become a part of the quote unquote squad, as they like to refer to them. And then he got in there and he did what they all do, right? Like it's the never ending fight when you start talking about voting and Democrats and progressives and all these things, these people who fight to get your vote under the guise of doing the thing that nobody's doing. And then they get in there and it's like, what we put you in there for if you were just going to fold and do all the things that you claimed you weren't going to do. So, Jared, I don't know if you had a second to see this article. It's in the list. It's in there. There's a link to the. Did I not put it in there? You shaking your head? No,
I'm saying I didn't see it. I'm saying I didn't see it, but I'm sure it's there.
Yeah. So, if you want to, it's in column D. Black Agenda Report line. Look.
Oh, wait a
13.
minute. I don't
row
see
13.
it.
Row 13, column D.
Wait.
You don't?
No, what I have on row 13 is the speech at Antioch. Oh no, there it is. I'm sorry. My bad. Okay, I got you. My bad. Here we go.
So it was placed in that row.
Yeah.
Specifically because the speech at Antioch, Ture speaks about political parties, and he speaks about the mass party versus the political party. And that brought me to this remembering that Bowman had lost his spot and remembering reading this article and really like it's brilliant how she breaks down the reality of Jamal Bowman and why, had he chosen to actually fight the system, maybe he would have had enough support from people who are sick of the system to not lose his seat when the money came for him.
Well, I mean, so it's funny because the forgive the comparison, but the small group of people that were trying to get me to run for Congress, for the Senate out here last year, that was their argument, that they said you would be the for the Maryland State Senate, right? They said you would be the only one who is taking the political positions that you're taking, and this is what people actually would want. You would actually have a popularity, a base of popularity that would probably surprise you. That was their argument. You know, my wife said I'm not allowed to do it, so it didn't happen. But that was enticing for a moment to think about it that way, to say that, to think of there is this moment where, particularly among younger people, there's this huge backlash against Zionism, just as an example, in defense of Palestine. And if there would be someone who was actually willing to stand on that principled platform, they might be, you know, supported more than they realize. But in trying to play that game that Bowman was playing, you got. So yeah, I didn't get a chance to see that article in detail, but I'm sure Margaret is not 100% correct. I'm sure she's right on. Yeah,
it's fantastic, and it can't. You know, my issue with all of these politicians and people is everything with them is half-assed, right? Like he says enough so that he can say he said it, but he's not doing anything that's actually going to support the halfway stance that he takes on it, right? Because in the end, they all voted to give the money. They all voted to redefine anti-Semitism. There is no actual like political stance, like active, actionable political stance that goes behind his attempt to like waffle about the fact that you should not be killing off a population of people simply because you want their land. Right? We've all
no. So, but if I'm hearing you correctly, and if I understood you, Mjiba, a moment ago, this is sort of the problem that we're facing, and something that we try to address around here regularly. That if we are not organizing for sort of the total political pie, so to speak, and we're not producing candidates, if we're not producing parties, if we're not producing platforms, if we're not producing other forms of militant struggle, even if Bowman was some decent human being and radical, he's not going to be able to do much on his own, sent out on some independent mission within the Democratic Party in this current construct. So I think that this is, again, even if we were, for me at least, wanted to sidestep judging Bowman's intent or his character or whatever, and just assess his overt political positions and arguments, it's a setup from jump. So again, it seems, appropriate on this day to be reminded that Ture was advocating for some grander form of political organization that would make, if not efforts like what happened with Bowman moot, at least reduced in its impact. Did that make sense? Am I on?
You are absolutely. Okay. And Jim, if I can ask you to hold 1 second, do you want to play the clip from Antioch, and then you'll have some time to, because I can feel it. I can feel she's about to drop some bars, and I can't wait.
All right. So this is Ture at Antioch. Let's see. And I should say that in 1973 at Antioch College, I should say, this is interesting now that I'm looking at this and setting it up here. My so actually, can I just take a quick interruptive moment? So because I put this up the other day, and when my godfather sent it to me to remind me, but my father and my godfather had formed a radical grad program at the university, at college, at Antioch College at one point. And this is my father here as a co-founder of the Cincinnati chapter of SNCC, meeting Ture. And my favorite part of that, the version of the story that I got, is that it's at this meeting that my father, again seated here, he and his crew gave Ture his first real gun. That's the version of the story that I got. That they said something like he came up there to meet them and had his little 22 or something like that. And they were like, "Nah, bro, this is not going to get it done. We need." So I don't know how real that is or not, but that's just one of my favorite stories. But here we go. Here's the clip of the man himself.
From defining its own aspirations at the expense of the people. Well, now, if you believe that the only interest is the building of the nation and the serving of the people, the one-party system is a mass party. But you must understand the difference between political parties and mass parties. A mass party is a party that affects every aspect of life of the individual in the society. I think the only example that I can allude to in America is, two examples. One is the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which we helped to organize in 1964. And then the second one was an offshoot of that, which was the Lowndes County Freedom Party, in Lowndes County, the first Black Panther Party in this country. In those parties, for example, in the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, it wasn't just a question of organizing the people politically for vote, but inside the party, we had farmer cooperatives. Inside the party, we had liberation schools. Inside the party, we had literacy classes. Inside the party, we had health classes, nurse care, which rendered services to the people, so that every aspect of the life of the people is tied into the mass party. Thus, the people are a much stronger vehicle, and they're not just called upon to vote every 4 years or every 7 years, et cetera, et cetera. And this alone is built in to have the people participating in the party.
Another level of clarity that even in that short clip seems to get left out of so much of the discussion every election cycle, but yeah, was there, what do we think about that?
So let me say this. First of all, you saw me reach for my phone, right? Google, who is Jamal Bowman? That's how tied in I am to U.S. politics. Me, I don't care, because I'm really, you didn't see me reaching my phone. Who is Jamal Bowman? Straight up, I had no idea who the guy was, because the reality is the U.S. is, sorry to say, but U.S. politics, U.S. Democratic electoral, so-called electoral politics, right, is a cesspool of corruption, of who knows who, of international corporations, and quite frankly, going out to vote every 4 years or every 2 years, or how many ever years you're going out to vote, is a waste of your time. Because the reality is, the person who has more investment from lobbying firms, from international, corporations, from various different entities across the U.S. and globally, they win, right? So, Jared, as much as it would be nice for you to run for U.S. congressperson, I'm not really sure that you would have won, my brother, unless you're independently wealthy. I mean, maybe I didn't know. Or unless you want to get bought off, right? Let's not forget that Israel is a 51st state of the U.S. So, I mean, I don't know Jamal Bowman's, I didn't even know who Jamal Bowman was, first of all, but I don't know what his relationship is. Well, because a lot of these lobbyists, they give you money for campaigns, right? And they have their own agendas. So you come to Congress and you vote, people think they're voting independently. You ain't voting independently. Well, look, people in Jamal Bowman's constituency, when was the last time he went and had a conversation with them and asked them about a bill he had to vote on? It don't happen, right? Can you roll up into Jamal Bowman's office for those people who are in his constituency and say, yo, son, I'm trying to talk to you about Bill X, Y, and Z? No. You may get as close as an aide, and they'll say they'll call you back. That's as far as you're going to get. And that still doesn't mean that after being elected in these spaces, that these folks care about you, right? And the reality is, quite frankly, Jared, it could be all of us on this call as some congressperson somewhere, and unless we had an alternate party with a revolutionary backing towards us, we would fall victim to the same thing. We may be abstaining for some votes. We may be protesting and not voting. I mean, we could certainly push the line, but the reality is we get absolutely one term. And if we wouldn't get, I don't know if they can impeach congresspersons, or we'd get kicked out because we'd be fighting all the time and not winning. It's like fighting an uphill battle, and you've got 55,000 pounds on your back, and you think somehow you're gonna be, you know what? I'm stronger than everybody. It's like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Kenya. You ain't trained a day in your life. You don't got no oxygen, nothing. One of the climbers who was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro for life, I mean, that was his thing. He decided he was going to go up to Mount Kilimanjaro with no oxygen because this was going to be his feat. My brother died on Mount Kilimanjaro, and he's a Kenyan. So me, Mjiba Frehiwot, who hasn't trained a day in our life, why would I climb Mount Kilimanjaro? This is the equivalent of someone thinking they're going to bring revolutionary ideas into so-called the Congress or whoever, the House, whichever, and somehow shift the system, which is embedded in gross capitalism. It's just not gonna happen. And so, as much as I think it makes sense, some people argue for, we need to have local elections. Yeah, that's cool. You can have local elected officials, and they can use some money in order to shift some things in the local community. But at the end of the day, if the masses don't control the resources, I don't know what electoral politics is going to do for you. If the masses can't engage with you if you don't come and have a conversation with me about this bill, this bill which is going to send more money to Israel and send guns and do blah blah blah. What do you all think about this, masses? If you don't come and have a conversation with me, we're not in a democratic relationship. We're in a one-sided relationship. When you come to me every 4 years and you say the right things and you ask me for my vote, and I get up early in the morning and I go stand at some community center or some church, and I'm so excited and I have exercised my democratic right, and then you realize after it doesn't even take long. You don't hear from them after 2.5 weeks after they've won. You don't hear from them. So the system is very much built in order for these people to either follow the script, right, which is promoting the expansion of capitalism, i.e. globalization, which is oppressing the masses of people and dividing the masses of people and not allowing the masses of people to have access to so-called real wealth, right? Because everyone can't be wealthy in a capitalist system. Then you may not get in, and if you get in, you may not actually win. And then two, everywhere you go, you're going to be blocked. I don't know this Bowman guy, right? But even if the guy put something on the floor that seemed semi-progressive, how many people did he need to get it passed? Ask yourself that. And ask yourself, from the Congressional Black Caucus, sorry to say, how many of those people are revolutionaries? How many of those folks are going to have your back if it comes to their job? You know what I'm saying? Because some of those folks are career politicians. So for me, I think, and I'm gonna end here. For me, this Bowman guy, see, I can't even get the guy's name right. It's Raymond. What is it? Jamal Bowman. My bad. Jamal Bowman. Right? No disrespect to Jamal Bowman. I'm sure he tried. Right? But even if you promise and that's politicians, I'm gonna promise you the world, and then I'm gonna give you a stick and be happier with a stick. And let us not think that this only happens in the US. Same thing happens in Ghana. Politicians promise the world, December 2024, we're having elections, right? We have two main parties, right? The NDC, NPP. And I'm not likening them to the Democrats or the Republicans. What I'm saying is very strange that all of these so-called multi-party democracies are modeling their so-called democracy off the US, which is not democratic at all, right? And you know, politicians, they promise you the world. Yeah, I'm gonna fix every single road. You know, everybody gonna have a job. You know, everyone's gonna have a borehole. Everyone, you know, there's gonna be factories all over. There's gonna, you know, and it's like you just can't do what you're promising, particularly in a space where we're living in global capitalism. Let me tell you something. I heard on the radio on my way, because I was a bit on the late side because I had to take my car to the mechanic. So I was rushing back, and I heard on I think it was on BBC or one of them that oh, you know, Ghana has gotten I think a second tranche of IMF loans, right, in the millions or whatever. And so now, you know, this is, in my view, this is structural adjustment 2.0, right? Because IMF and World Bank are basically going across the continent and giving out these loans, which have high levels of interest. But what they're saying is there's a freeze on employment in the public sector, right? You can't invest in infrastructure. I mean, this is all structural adjustment, right? The first structural adjustment program. So how do you expect a country to develop when, for example, you can't robustly develop your healthcare system because a lot of your funds are going to interest on loans. The other amount of your funds are going to importing food because you're arable. Is it arable, the land where you can grow agriculture, right? You're growing cash crops. There's land grabbing going around, right? Like my students are reading this thing on land grabbing right now. And, you know, we're like, you know, there are multinational corporations grabbing land across the continent, using it for whether it's, you know, whether it's building, you know, these industries, whatever they're using, they're grabbing land. So you can't grow food inside. So you're importing all this food. So the money that you're using to import food and to do all these other things, import toothpicks, import cars, whatever, you can't put into hospitals. You can't put into educational institutions, right? You can't put into infrastructure. So you're just consistently dependent, right, on the West. But you're modeling your own development and you're modeling your own so-called democracy after Western democracy, i.e. U.S. democracy, which ain't working to begin with. You see Jamal Bowman that got kicked out, whether he did the right thing or not, right? So that there's no way
and we
that
just
any country,
my bad to cut you off, but we just heard,
no.
I just heard last night that the congressman that was brought in, I can't remember his name, that was brought in by APAC to get rid of Cynthia McKinney, however many years, decades ago, a decade or more ago, is still there. So to your point, like they got rid of her, and this dude is they could just perennially keep him in. Sorry about it. It just occurred to me. I heard that last night.
No, that's it. No. This is exactly it. This is not about democracy. Congress is not about democracy. You know, this is not about democracy. Because if it was about democracy, then congresspersons would be making minimum wage. If it was about democracy, they would be making nothing, and they would be giving their salary to develop, right, the nation or whatever. That ain't happening. They're balling. And when they get out of Congress, they have, you know, retirement for life or pension for life, right? They're paid handsomely, right? And so ask yourself this: if you yourself are not living like a congressperson who's supposed to be representing you, right? Are they really representing you? Are they of the people, or are they of the capitalist class? That's my thing. They're of the capitalist class. They don't care about you. They care about their pocketbook. They care about their donors. They care about this elite class. When's the last time you saw a congressperson eating lunch next to you in a restaurant or at a gas station? I'm just saying, do you ever see anybody pull into wherever? The Shell, we shouldn't be doing Shell anyways because they're exploitative. They're exploiting Nigeria, but that's a different ballgame. But have you ever seen a congressperson pull up next to you at the Shell and pump their own gas? That ain't democracy. Anyways, I'm done.
I mean,
That's the standard. We got to see somebody pumping gas at the gas station to know
all right,
they
but
real.
just know I live in New Jersey, and none of us are allowed.
None
to
of
pump
you,
our
right,
gas.
right. Everybody's like forced full service.
My bad.
Right.
My bad.
So everybody outside of Jersey, except for Jersey, we'll call this the Jersey exception.
The Jersey
Except for Jersey,
Yes.
we need to see you out there pumping gas.
There we go. So
we also don't pump our gas in Ghana, so you're not alone.
Okay, so see, there we go. So here's my question, and this is everybody who is in the chat is gonna be like, here she go. So this is my conundrum, right? Which is that everything you say is correct about politics, politicians. It's not a democracy, 100%. So my conundrum is in not participating in electoral politics, right? We leave all the decisions to the people who should not be making the decisions. So how do we organize in a way that actually gains power within a system that purely exists to ensure that people do not have power? Like it's the never ending circle, right? Like you can't change anything if you don't have the power to change anything. You can't get the power to change anything without being within the thing that's created for you not to have power. Like when I tell you I spit in circles with this consistently because I don't have the right answer. And I am a firm believer that people have to do what they are comfortable doing, right? So if you don't want to vote, don't vote. Right now, I am never going to tell anybody vote blue no matter who, because I can't I can't do it. But I understand that for some people, that's their way. Everybody has to do what they have to do. But how do you fight this system without, in some ways, being part of the system, right? Like I feel like a Jared winning means, even if it only lasts for one term, maybe in that one term, he does something that significantly changes the material conditions for the people within his district, perhaps. Now, is that enough? I don't know. Is it possible that him doing the one thing actually engages people, and then now you have two Jareds next time? I don't know. Like, right? Like, how do you, I don't know how to engage people, because the system is so jacked, right? It's so jacked. Like, I don't even want to have that conversation most of the time, because I fully agree that electoral politics is a waste of time for the majority, because the system is set up for it to be a waste of time. So am I making sense? Like, I see you nodding, so I know I'm making sense. But how do we engage in that in a real way so that people can find the energy to organize in a way that is actually going to lead to power and change?
Can I inject 60 seconds of inspiration for your answer? Because knowing that you're in Ghana and we're having a Pan-African conversation, and forgive me, Renee, for this, because this was literally just sent to me. And I feel like the gods have spoken, because we need Mjiba to intervene, given what was just sent at this time, Kwame Ture's birthday. An important question, like you just asked, despite this horrific interruption I'm making. But I just as inspiration for your forthcoming answer, this was just said to me.
Oh Lord.
Drip, dripple, drippers. Drip, dripple, drippers. Drip, dripple, drippers. Drip,
Pan-Africanism hip hop.
when I touch down, I say a grabber. That's how they greet the Dundada. I get you smoke like grabber. All the clothes say Prada.
Jim Jones.
Like, hey, ma. Ain't got it.
All right. So I'm not gonna play it. I can't even do the whole thing. My point, really, I keep getting sent these messages.
What in the world? What is that?
Jim Jones in Africa, in Ghana. One of my, by extension, homeboys, Diallo Sumbri, is in Ghana with a very Pan-African business model, a Pan-African entrepreneurial business model. Jim Jones expressing Pan-Africanism, 21st century style. I'm sorry to do that to everyone, but it was, I saw him in the thing saying he's in Ghana, and I'm like, oh my God. So this is what I'm saying. This is why we have to gather to have these conversations. And
right, because this is what we get. This is what we get. We get gold sneakers, and we get ice cream, and we get weekend at Bernie's at Juneteenth celebration. Like, this is what we get. Like, I do not understand for the life of me how this became, like, how is this the representation of Pan-African? Like, I can't.
But I'm sorry to have side read, because the initial question was, what do we do with this voting conundrum? Where do we go? How do we, because this is what we get when anyway, I don't know. I'm sorry for everybody.
Let me just say this. That was quite disturbing. Okay. That was disturbing.
I need you to get Ghana in check, Mjiba. You gotta get your Ghanaians in check.
Disturbing. Oh my God.
So if we don't Pan-African, they Pan-African that way. That's really what I'm trying.
Absolutely. Really but you know what? Honestly, is it Pan-Africanism though, right? Like, because you put on some cloth. First of all, was it even put on the right way? I don't know. I didn't get a chance to look. Secondly, you're sitting in a golden, seat, a stool, whatever. You've got on the golden crown. Is that really Pan-Africanism? And I'm not disrespecting nobody who's on their hustle in Ghana and bringing people on tours and talking about Ture and Kwame Nkrumah, but for me, and let me just say this, in Ghana, and I'm going to come back to your question, Renee, but in Ghana, we had the year of return, we had the decade of return, and there are a lot of diasporans that are capitalizing off of that, right? And are bringing people, and it's like a Pan-African business model, and come to my tour and pay this amount of money, and I'll put you in a 5-star hotel, and I'll do this, and I'll do this, and we'll go around on air-conditioned buses, and we'll just have a great time, and we'll be popping bottles, like, and is that Pan-Africanism? I think it is an exploitation of the Pan-African movement. I think that this, whatever that was an exploitation of African culture. Of course, we know Sekou Toure told us that everything is cultural, right? So everything that we do is cultural. It's our mode of life. But I think what tends to happen is Pan-Africanism becomes a fad, something that's fashionable, and we believe that makes us somehow more in line with, or this nasty word that people are saying. It's a nasty word now, but woke, right? It makes us woke. It doesn't do anything. How are you grinding? Are you in an organization? Are you changing, in whatever space you're in? Are you changing the minds and hearts of African people? Are you, thinking ideologically about how to shift these systems, right? Are you contributing to doing that? To actually shifting the masses of people's thinking so that they can push back against the system, right? If you're not doing that, you're cool. You're a cool African. You're bringing people to Ghana. That's cool. You're showing people Africa that probably never thought they would come to Africa. That's also cool, right? But is it Pan-African? No, I don't think so. Because particularly if you're exploiting the people, right? Like I'll just tell you a quick story, and I'm going to get to the question. So I was invited to speak, and the organization shall remain nameless, but I was invited to help coordinate a panel on Pan-Africanism, right? And there was a bunch of diaspora people who were coming to this conference, and then the organizers wanted to invite some university students from Ghana, so UG, some of the other universities across Ghana, and so I was helping to coordinate it. And we got to the program, and it was in one of the most expensive hotels in Ghana. We had University of Ghana students, or students in Ghana coming, and they didn't offer the students that came in Ghana one water bottle. They didn't offer them one, anything to eat, nothing to take away. They didn't offer them a chip, a cookie, a soda, or nothing. And some of them drove like an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And so what I said was, and I sent a scathing message to the organizers, one of the leads here in Ghana, and what was sent to the organizers, that that you are privileging people who were born in the U.S. and have been here for 3.5 days, right? Who don't even know how to change money well, over people who are making contributions to Pan-Africanism on the ground. And that is anti-African, and it's anti-Pan-African, right? But in the name of Pan-Africanism, one can bring people to the continent, show them all these great things, connect with all these people, and they think that they're a Pan-Africanist, and that doesn't necessarily make you a Pan-Africanist. Means you must work and study. Now, you can have Pan-African ideals, but how are you implementing those ideals is the question. Now, on to this question about what do we do. So I think it's a double-edged sword. And let me be clear. I do not vote. I have not voted since the 90s, and I would never vote again in my life unless there's an equitable, people-centered space in which I'm voting. And that's because I feel like it's a waste of my vote. It's a political choice not to vote. If people vote, that's cool. Do you vote? I don't have no problems with you voting. I know some folks who are running for some offices, in different like local offices in Ghana, one mayor, one commissioner, one, whatever. I'll help you if you want. I'll help you. I'll put your stuff on Facebook. I'll help you organize. I'm not voting because I don't vote, but I will help you do if you want to get into this system and shift the system. I think the problem becomes when you're in a system that's so toxic, right? It will corrupt you quickly. And because the majority of people in the system are corrupted, even if it doesn't corrupt you, your ability to do what you want to do will be very minimal. Now, you may say, I'm okay with the minimal, and that's cool for me. You may say, I want to be in the system because I want to push back against X, Y, and Z. That's also okay for me. But recognize where you're at. And if you recognize where you're at, you can actually be more effective to know that you're not in an equitable system. You are not an egalitarian system where your vote actually counts. You are not actually equal. You are not actually going to be able to make the major changes you want to make. If you're aware of that and you're aware that, I might do one term because I know the positions I'm going to take are going to be harsh, then you can organize with the community to push back and to think critically about what the next step will be, right? About how to shift resources, about how to make sure the masses of people have access to some of these things that are needed. And let me also say this, and before I stop, I think it's a mistake or an error, maybe not say a mistake. I think it's an error for us to think that the U.S. government will shift without a push. And let's be clear that who pushes the U.S. government are other governments. So, for example, the U.S. don't mess with China, right? The U.S. does not engage in shenanigans with China because China, whatever people's position is about China, China is a strong nation, right? The African continent must be unified and liberated and move as a continent. And when that happens, these global capitalist entities will also be able to be pushed. As it stands right now, if we want to go in Ghana to India, and we get a lot of, like in Ghana, we get a lot of bilateral loans, right? And so, for example, myself and a colleague of mine is doing a paper on soft power in India. And one of the things we did when we were doing some primary source research, looking at parliamentary records and stuff like that, is that India has given Ghana millions in lines of credit. And then in one case, it was like 24 million in a line of credit to create a factory which would produce like hose, backhoes, and things you need for like if you're a farmer, right? On one side. Then the same memo of parliament said, can you please also accept this line of credit for 24 million, but allocate the contract to this particular company in India. So that company came to Ghana to develop this industry. Then the same parliamentary memo said, this is public knowledge. I'm not making nothing up. The same memo said, and we want to give this company in India a $1.2 million tax break so they don't have to pay any taxes to come and operate in the country. Now you tell me, what is one person supposed to do when there's these backroom deals happening, right? Which are ultimately disenfranchising many African countries. And if Africa, and let's be clear, there's an India-Africa strategy that India has. There's not an Africa-India strategy. So India is going around to different countries and giving loans. India is just one example. I'm not necessarily, down in India, but I'm saying, how do we, in this kind of a system, we have to ask ourselves, one, how do we push the masses to have a different outlook on society? And also demand a different kind of economic system. Get in the streets when we're going to get loans from the IMF, right? And say we will refuse to take them. Get in the streets when we're going to be taking loans from these various different bilateral institutions, and perhaps push for some level of Pan-African activities across these so-called colonial borders. And I think for me, if you're based in the US, I think the same strategy can exist. I don't think people shouldn't run for Congress. I'm just saying, when you get in there, I don't know how much you're going to do. And if you do run for Congress, what you should be doing the majority of your time is checking back in with the masses of people and putting together a strategy so that you can get what the masses of people believe they need for their community. If you just come into Congress and you sit there like you're just another congressperson and, you just go along or you fight a bit or whatever, you're not necessarily going to meet the needs of your community. And at the end of the day, you've got to know where you're going. For example, and then I'll close it. If you're running into a burning building, you might want to know that the building is on fire. You might not want to run into the burning building and think that the flames won't catch you. The flames will catch you. So you might want to cover up properly with whatever gear that fire persons use in order not to get burnt to a crisp. These democratic dispensations are burning buildings. So if you're going to go into a burning building, protect yourself and find ways to have the masses on your back if a problem comes down the pipeline. Thank you. Long one. Sorry.
But can I just tell you, you just gave me something that I have been looking for 38 weeks. I don't think because I always talk about this conundrum, literally always talk about it. And for the first time, I heard something that I was like, I can tell people that, which is you do not have to participate. You don't have to vote to assist someone who wants to do the right thing. And it literally, like, it just, no, as I was listening to you talk, I was like, oh, wait, she's right though. Like, you don't have to go stand online, but you can still make a phone call, share a post, if you think that the person who is going to participate is actually going to participate in the way that the people need them to. And so I don't know if it fully solved my conundrum, but it gave me an answer. And that's what I've been looking for 38 weeks, is an answer to the question, how do you tell people that there's a way? Whew.
So I know we have about 20 minutes left before we make way for warrior class. I'm wondering if you all would mind if I played a roughly just short of 3-minute clip from Ture during one of my favorite debates with Molefi Asante years ago. But particularly because of the question, he references one of my favorite books in a topic that I think is pretty relevant right now, but minus the analysis that he offers. And then we could maybe use that as a way to wrap for this morning. But this question here on, well, it's self-evident.
Africa is a very spiritual continent. If we were just to isolate our contributions to world religions, we would see this. The first sacred book in the world was written by Africa, written by Africans in Africa over 6,000 years ago. It's incorrectly called the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Thanks to our struggle by many of our intellectuals today who have applied their skills to the people's struggle, they've come to show that the real title should be the Book of Coming Forth. I imagine this is your area, you know much better than I. It was Africa that gave to the world monotheism, belief in one God. It was Africa that gave to the world Judaism, and this one must be properly understood, because here a lot of confusion comes into play, and Zionism plays an evil role here, trying to confuse everything. Judaism was given to the world by Africa. It could only be given to the world by Africa because in that part of the world, the only place where monotheism had been accepted and was breeding was in Africa. If you looked east to Africa, in Persia, they were worshiping the sun. To the north of Africa, in Palestine, they were worshiping idols and would do so until the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his name, came to give them monotheism in the form of Islam. So it was Africa that gave Judaism to the world. I know the first Jews in the world were Africans. That's why I'm never confused. They call me anti-Jewish, and I'm anti-Zionist. I can't be anti-Jewish. My people gave you the religion. You know. On the question of Christianity, again, Africa's role is, you know, when Jesus Christ, peace be upon his name, was in trouble, it was only Africa that gave him refuge. That's where he grew up as a young man, learning and growing. The very first country mentioned in the Bible, Genesis 2, verse 13, is Nubia and Ethiopia. If my memory serves it correctly, I think in the Bible they're called Havilah and sometimes Cush. That's Genesis 2, verse 13. If you just take statistical analysis of the Bible, you will say Egypt and Ethiopia is mentioned more than Israel. Of course, we know of the role of Africa in giving protection to the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his name, when they were in trouble, and even given refuge to Joseph when he was sold by his brothers into Egypt. So Africa is a very spiritual society. This spirituality must be respected and must be understood. But by this, we do not mean that this spirituality broken down into religions. That's where people get confused between spirituality and religion. We just want to make that clear. But Africa certainly has, throughout the continent, a great sense of spirituality, and one which, even if you're not African, when you're in the continent, you become amazed at it.
So forgive me, I thought he made reference in that later in that clip, he makes reference to Freud's Moses or monotheism in his explanation as to how Judaism evolved in Africa by way of critiquing Zionism. But I thought this was just a little clip. And of course, whether it's in Stokely Speaks or whether it's in the Thelwell autobiography, there's a lot of discussion from Ture on the history of Zionism, the need for solidarity between Africans and Palestinians, that obviously 50 years later is still an ongoing, and his analysis is still, I think, appropriate. But Mjiba, Renee, as a way of wrapping us up, I thought this would be a good topic area to explore. So
yes, and interestingly enough, as I said before we were all together, like there's just so much of what he talks about that circles back. In fact, in Berkeley, he speaks about the student protests and what happened in response to the students at Berkeley. And he called attention to it in a sense of saying, what did you do when these students were removed from campus for protesting? And I thought to myself, how is this conversation repeating itself? Literally repeating itself. And it really is, you must really think to yourself, the fact that this happens, that it's so circular, that it keeps coming back to the same ideology and the same responses and the same problems, obviously we have not learned the lesson yet, right? We are obviously still living under this system where it is nothing but propaganda and diversion, right? And like it really is amazing to me how much of what he said in the 70s and 60s, like how much of it, like you play it now, and even in reading the comments under the speeches, it's multiple comments of, oh man, this is still valid. Oh, this is still so true. Oh, right. And so there's just so much to be learned from recognizing that the fact that we did not listen to these voices is how we're still in these situations currently. Like, that's literally why, because we didn't organize, right? Because the people didn't rise up, because we don't have mass parties versus political parties. Like it's all the same problem that has circled back and kept us trapped within this system. And it's just, it's something. It really is something.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, quite frankly, the struggle in Palestine from 1948 to present is about resources. Let's not confuse ourselves. We're confused sometimes. We try to pretend like it's about religion. It is not about religion. It's about resources. Look at Palestine on a map. It's strategically placed in between Africa and the Middle East. It's about resources. It is not about who is or who is not Jewish or Muslim, who is or who does not, agree with Judaism or Islam. It's a battle for resources. Period. End of story. It's not about who in what Bible, at what time that Jewish people were in Palestine 5,000, 3,000 years ago. None of that is relevant. It is about resources. Because if it was about religion, one would think that the religious principles that are in Judaism, that are in Islam, that are in Christianity, or wherever, or African religions would promote a healthier engagement between people in Israel and people in Palestine. It's not about religion, right? Look, you have all of these missionaries all over the continent and globally that are trying to bring people into Christianity and into Catholicism, and they run around and they try to save people's souls. If it was about religion, folks in Israel would be all over Palestine trying to save souls. It's not about religion. Period. And anybody that tells you that it is, they're lying to themselves. They've not done any research, because the founders, whose name is escaping me right now, they were atheists. The founders of Israel are
You
atheists.
talking about Herzl, Theodore Herzl?
Yes.
And all of them? Yeah.
They're thank you. They're atheists. So is it about religion? These people didn't even believe in God. They didn't even believe in religion. Right? And I was going to say this other guy, Herkovitz, which is like ASA, African Studies thing. That's why I was like, wait, that's not the right person. But they didn't even believe in religion. So it's not about religion. It's about who has access to resources, who can control that land mass, right? And honestly, it's genocide. What's happening is genocide. Do religious bodies promote genocide? I don't think so. And the reality is the U.S. is 100%, complicit in the genocide that's happening right now in Palestine. How much of the annual budget in the U.S. goes to Palestine? I mean, to Israel. I thought it was $6 billion or some crazy amount of money. I don't know how much it is today. Last time I looked. Why would you be sending billions of dollars to Israel? Not alone. This is like part of the annual, budget. Why would you be doing that? Is it not to control and to have some sense of control in that region? Please. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that
Here
up.
they are. Thank you. Straight up atheists. Didn't even believe in any kind of God or higher power or spirituality. So why in the world will we say it's about religion? But it's the negative I know we have to go, but it's this propaganda. And this is why the masses of people need to be ideologically clear. Look, when you come across the continent, quite frankly, let us be honest. When you come and you talk to somebody about Palestine, they're like, well, wait a minute. What they're doing to people in Israel and blah, blah, blah. What? Really? Oh, when they went in, Hamas went in and killed some people. What? Really? You know what's been happening since 1948? And even if this happened, are you telling me that the U.S. and Israel doesn't have advanced technology to identify who so-called came in and captured people on October 7th? What about 1948? What about what's been happening since 1948? And then on top of that, does that justify the killing of close to 50,000 people, many women and children, bombing entire spaces, telling people to go south and you bomb where they go? Is this about religion? I don't think so. And interestingly, this is an interesting thing. I had a student who had an Israeli flag and he was flying the Israeli flag in his car. I said, my brother, you must not have researched what's happening right now to the Palestinian people. Because if you did, you wouldn't be flying that flag. You know what he said? So I saw him once. I said it. He went a boom. And then I came back and he said, I'm going to take it out. I said, okay, I hope so. Because the next time I don't want to see that Israeli flag. Because if you don't know if you know what's going on in Palestine and you're happy to fly the flag because you are down with killing 50,000 people, decimating universities, decimating communities, rolling over people, then okay, that's cool. The brother said he was at the library and someone wrote in red pen on and put a note on his car that he must not be educated about what's going on in Palestine because if he was, he would not be flying that Israeli flag. He said they put it in red pen. He promptly took that Israeli flag out of his car.
So what you're saying, we got to get our red pens out? Get your red Sharpies out? Pens. An army of red Sharpies.
It's about a lack of political education, because really when you listen, and I'm finishing here, but when you listen to Christian preachers and this thing around Christianity, there's this push that everyone must go to Zion and that Israel is the sacred land and everyone must go and, we must protect them because, they're the original people and all of this kind of madness. When if you actually read the Bible, it doesn't say that, number one. And number two, even if it said that, even if the original people in that land were Jewish, they would not look like what they look like in Israel today. Let us be clear.
I mean, when you consider that the majority of the Israeli population is from New York and New Jersey, probably not.
And if you consider that when Britain gave Palestine a British protectorate to these Jewish folks because of the Holocaust, they was also going to give Uganda and then another place in South America. So why would you offer up another place that don't have nothing to do with the original people, right? And all of these folks coming out of Germany, out of Poland, out of these places. Are you telling me they moved from Israel to these places? No, they are of European descent, and their religion, or maybe even their ethnicity, is Jewish. I mean, I'm not debating what you say your ethnicity is, but you're not the original people. And even if you are, it does not justify killing 50 million people, 50,000 people. We must be in solidarity, because if it can happen in Palestine, they will come for us next. And let me say this before I end. Everyone must join a revolutionary organization with a political education process, a work and study process. Because you can't transform your ideology if you're sitting in your room reading Kwame Ture at 3 a.m., listening to some incense, not engaging with, we know we do this, not engaging with people. Look, having locks, I got locks, that don't make you conscious. Wearing African garb, that don't make you conscious. As we've seen, the hip hop in Ghana, that don't make you conscious. Saying you read something, saying you're giving out sandwiches. I'm down with people who give out sandwiches to homeless. That don't necessarily make you politically conscious. I'm just saying. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
So wait, real quick, because we still have like 3 minutes. It's a short clip. So from the speech at UGA, he ended with something that I feel like is everything that you just said and everything we've been talking about. It's beautiful. It's perfect. So it's the line, row 11, the 50-minute marker. If you could line that up for me, and then we can actually end with those words, because it is Ture talking about why we must organize. And that's
a perfect way to do it. And as I
that's
pull
the way
this
to do
up,
it.
I will say big thanks to you, Sister Mjiba, for coming through short notice and doing your thing as always. Thanks to you again, of course, Renee, and to all the remixers. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, stretch and hydrate as you prepare for warrior class. And again, a very special and sort of perennial happy birthday and appreciation to Kwame Ture and all those Africans struggling for African liberation and beyond. So thank you all very much, and peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say.
And thank you for joining. It's so appreciated, and we will take care.
Right on. Let's go. Right on.
Over with the question and answer periods, we can stay and discuss it. Those of you who do not want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, those are white youth here who think that, well, this man Carmichael talk nonsense. Well, even if you talk nonsense, one thing you can't disagree with is that this man telling you you better organize and telling you better use your knowledge to serve humanity. You better use your knowledge to serve humanity. I tell you that because I know if you truly use your knowledge to serve humanity, you got to fight for socialism. That's how sure I am of what I say. Africans, you must come now and organize your people. We know that one man, one woman cannot free the people. We know that. And we know that if the people are oppressed and we're not doing anything to help end the oppression, we are objectively against the people, whether we know it or not. Whether we know it or not. Well, sometimes we don't know it, but if you're not working for the people, you're against them. If you're not now in an organization working for the benefit of your people, you're against your people. As students, those of you who come here to this university, you have a responsibility. Either you come and you take the knowledge here and you use the knowledge to help humanity, or you take the knowledge and use it to become rich. Let it be properly understood. If being rich is the dominant force, you cannot ride the two together. Even the Bible says you cannot serve two masters at the same time. Either you must come here motivated by a love for the people, or come here motivated by a love of money. If you come here motivated by a love of money, if you come here as a cheating student, if you haven't learned anything tonight, then I want you to learn this. Take your knowledge, learn your knowledge by yourself, don't cheat, and do everything you can to help humanity. Thank you.
With Renee.